Great. So let's talk about recent RFE trends for NIW.
Yeah, sounds good. So I think everyone who's been following trends is pretty much aware that there's a widespread acknowledgement right now that RFEs for NIW are a lot higher in volume than usual. And they're starting to question cases that would have sailed through a couple of years ago. I do want to talk a little bit about what these trends look like, just so you all understand what's going on with it. In January of 2022, USCIS published a policy manual update, and that update explained the precedent Danisar decision in a little bit more detail. But more importantly, at the end of the policy manual, they inserted a whole section about STEM occupations and STEM professions. That publication really opened up NIW to a lot of engineers and individual contributors and people who hadn't really been successful with the NIW in the past. It was an explicit acknowledgement from USCIS that these occupations also matter and that NIW is not just for researchers. And so we were successful in filing a ton of NIWs under this new policy manual update. It seems to be a way that USCIS was finally saying, look, we know perm is a disaster. We know there are tons of talented STEM workers here in the US who are making huge contributions to the US who can't get their perm. And so they're going to be kicked out of the country. So it seemed like this was a fix for that whole situation. As long as the foreign worker, the immigrant worker, could show that they were making individual and personal contributions and were benefiting the United States. Not all officers since 2022 have really gone along with this. A lot of them still did apply the traditional Danisar analysis. So we get tons of approvals, but also a few denials here or there from officers whose denial decisions were very clearly targeting and looking for researchers and not really willing to consider any industry people or individual contributors. So moving on to the current trends, I've now seen a very large number of RFEs that are focused on questioning the three prongs of Danisar, especially national importance. That's the number one thing that they question. And they're not mentioning the policy manual updates for STEM at all. Like it's not even factoring into their analysis or their decision making, which I think is puzzling, given that there's been no policy manual update. USCIS is supposed to still follow this policy manual, but it seems like they're acting like it doesn't exist anymore. I don't know what the agency is going to do about it. I definitely think they should be sued on this, and I'm actually looking into litigation options because we have received our first two denials where the denial notices didn't interact with any of our evidence. One of them was less than a page long in substance. The other was less than 2 pages long in substance. They were very clearly looking for researchers, totally ignored evidence in the record, totally ignored the policy manual, and we're just like, USCIS did not do its job here. There's nothing in this decision that is tied to current agency policy. So they definitely need to be sued on this so that the agency can finally get it together and be consistent in the standards that it's applying, and also follow its own internal policy guidance. I think it's particularly frustrating that they are not doing that at this time. And if they announce policy guidance to the public and say, this is how you get an NIW, and then change the standard completely when you submit your individual case to them, that's not fair. And that goes against the fundamental principles of administrative law. So that's kind of where we stand right now. I will say these cases are still getting approved. Many of them are sailing through. You do need to articulate an argument on why your work individually and personally is of national importance. So it is a key component to the NIW case. And so I'm not discouraging people from applying. Chances are still very good and very high. But I am particularly frustrated by this shift where it seems like the subgroup of officers who's not following policy seems to now have expanded their influence, and now more of them are looking at the cases in this way. That's how I'm looking at the situation right now.